Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second day of our summer boot camp. My name is Aroshi Ghosh, and I am the founder of AI Spectra. And here with me today is Mrs. Renee Niemi. So as a self-professed gadget junkie, Miss Niemi has spent most of her career creating high-impact products and businesses that make a difference in consumers' lives. Additionally, Renee is part of the board of Scientific Adventures for Girls, nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women in STEM through workshops, classes, and other events. So today she'll be joining us to talk a little bit more about her journey from an engineer to a board member and how she works to encourage other young women to continue their STEM journeys. With that, I will pass it on to Mrs. Niemi.
Well, hi guys. So good to see you, and I'm so happy to be here. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. So Roshi has asked me to share a little bit of my journey, and I think if I could just give you a preview, you go into engineering thinking that you're going to be an engineer, and I was no different, although I was different, but I didn't know it. And so I'm going to share with you kind of a little bit about my journey and some of the secrets, in the hopes that, when you realize that there are many paths that you can take depending on what's important to you and what you love to do, I think is really the key message. So first of all, I grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad is still alive, retired, 6-time entrepreneur. And you got that right. 6 different companies that he started and ran. And which you guys probably are super comfortable with, but back in those days, so this was in the 60s and 70s, the Valley looked a lot different. And so starting 6 companies was quite unique and different. And so I grew up in an environment that was always super innovative. My dad always had multiple computers. This is before you had computers at home, just setting the expectation. He always had something going on. So that's a little bit of, context for you. So not surprisingly, when I started, as a child, I was always super curious. Yes, I liked Barbies, and this is kind of going to sound strange, but I always took them apart and put them back together to see how they were built. I remember one time when I was a kid, I walked around with a screwdriver and I literally unscrewed everything that had a screw in it and took it apart and looked at, including light switches, by the way, which freaked mom out a little bit. And so obviously my dad and my mom saw something in me that said, wow, she's very curious and she really wants to learn how things work. So fast forward, it was time to apply for schools, and engineering in those days was very competitive. But my dad, being a Silicon Valley, entrepreneur, said, listen, it's super important that you get a technical foundation. And once you have a technical foundation, you can just go do whatever you want. Because I wasn't sure I wanted to be an engineer. I go, there's not very many people and you're kind of in a corner. And he's like, no, goes, go get the technical foundation. So I applied to schools, and including, UCLA, and I applied to, all the typical California schools. I got into UCLA, but what I didn't tell my dad is that I was afraid I wasn't going to get in under electrical engineering. So I applied under the School of Psychology, thinking that I could transfer to engineering. So anyways, fast forward, he found out. I did not go to UCLA. I ended up going to Santa Clara University, which, by the way, ended up being the best decision in the world. But the reason why I'm telling you all of these stories is, even in my early days, my father was acting as a mentor. And what you're going to learn through my journey is I always had a mentor. Even today, I have a mentor. And sometimes they adopted me. Sometimes I was born into them, like my dad. but there was always somebody helping guide my direction. And that's like, if there's one takeaway from this, just remember, like, you're not on this journey by yourself. Always find somebody to help you. Okay. So I ended up going to the Santa Clara University School of Engineering. Anybody want to guess how many women in the electrical engineering school in my class? Yes.
2. I'm going to lowball it.
That is such a good guess. That's exactly right. Fantastic. I was one. Guess who the second one was? My roommate. How that happened, I still do not know. But it was amazing. By the way, she and I are dear friends still to this day. She's like one of my besties. So anyways, but here's the interesting thing. And this is kind of my lesson number 2 for you, because everybody talks about, women in engineering and us being the minority. I'm just going to really, really encourage you to take that thought and park it. Because when you're in an engineering world, you're an engineer. Yes, you're a female. Yes, you bring unique things to that and you should embrace it. But do not think of yourself as different. Think of yourself as you and your unique qualities you bring to the table. I have to tell you, never, ever once in my entire career journey did I ever really think about myself being a woman and being different. I always thought of myself as being a woman, caring about certain things. I was always just there to get the job done in the best way that I knew how to get it. Okay. So yes, I was one of 2, and boy, the odds were in my favor, because I like to, I wasn't too much of a nerd. I actually kind of like to play a lot. And so I kind of took a really interesting path in college. Yes, I was, taking all, the engineering courses and passing them, by the way. I did get my degree. I didn't get it all A's. I'm just going to put that out there. But what I did do in my journey is I really got involved with the school. My freshman year, I ended up creating homecoming. The school had never had homecoming. We picked a homecoming court, and we did, and because I thought that would be cool and that we could, I missed it from high school. My second year, I can't remember what I did my second year, but my third year, I actually tried out for cheerleading. Yeah, cheerleading. Hello. So I was going to the lab. I made it, by the way. So I went to my lab, in the afternoon, and then I grabbed my cheerleading bag from the lab and I went to practice. Right. So I always kind of took this different path. And what I'm going to tell you is maybe I should have gotten better grades. I don't know. But my college learning journey was much more than just paper and pencil. Because, by the way, as soon as you get out of college, the whole world has changed again, right? Engineering is changing at such a rapid pace that the more important thing is learning how to learn. Okay. Like knowing that you're going to continuously be growing and learning. Engineering skills are important, but people skills are important too. And what I was doing, and I didn't really know it at the time, but I was developing both my engineering skills and my people skills by doing all these other activities. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I chaired the judiciary board on campus. That was the board that when students got in trouble for partying too much or doing something bad, that I handed out the discipline. It was very popular. And I'm being sarcastic. So anyways, I'm keeping this light and I'm telling you this because, sometimes we take things too seriously. And you want to develop your whole skills, not just a narrow set of skills. By the way, definitely develop the narrow set of skills too. Don't leave those behind. Okay. So what happens out of college? Well, all of my peers one, ended up going, I shouldn't say that. There was, probably about 100 of us. Most of them ended up going into very technical roles. My challenge was I liked people a lot, and the thought of sitting behind a computer 24/7 actually did not appeal to me. So when I started interviewing, I started to realize that there were a couple different paths you could take. And instead of going right into a technical role out of college, I ended up taking on a technical training role where I was responsible for creating all the training curriculum. This was in a semiconductor company that doesn't exist anymore called Fairchild. But I took all the curriculum and I helped train and make sure that all of our field technical engineers had all the training from all the divisions that they needed to sell the products. Now, that's part of the story. The other part of the story, again, mentor. When I was doing my interviewing, I ended up connecting with a senior executive that I really liked. And he asked me one question. And his question was, he goes, what do you want to do long-term? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And without hesitation, I said, oh, I see myself running a company. And he looked at me, because that's not a very typical response coming out of college. Well, not in those days. It's probably a lot more typical these days. And so we started talking about it, and I said, listen, I want all the experiences. I want some of the technical experiences. I want, some of the marketing experiences. I would love to have some of the sales experience, and eventually somehow get exposed to finance so that I can run a company. And so he put me in this technical training role specifically because of that answer in kind of in that interview question. So things all happen for a reason. He ended up becoming my mentor. So through that first journey, he ended up moving from Cupertino to South Portland, Maine. He moved me from Cupertino to South Portland, Maine, and I got a career boost from that. He ended up leaving, our company was acquired, and he ended up joining a startup. 6 months later, I was at the startup with him, actually designing a chip for a computer. But he every step of the way really, really coached me and would, give me exposure, because he knew what I wanted, right? So he's constantly giving me the exposures that I needed. So that was my first job, one of my first jobs out of school. That was my first job out of school. Anyways, fast forward, I always stayed curious. So again, that learning in school for me was less about, digital electronics 101. It was really more about how do you learn and balance life. And I got an A in that class, the learning and balancing of life. And so as I progressed in my career, I stayed curious. So fast forward, I went from being an electrical engineer at the startup, and I said, you know what, I really, really don't think we defined the product right, because it didn't sell very well. And so I just started being curious. And so when I went to trade shows and whatnot, I would start asking people, well, what would you want? What would you want? And so I came back, nobody asked me to do this, but I came back to my boss at the time. And I said, I think this is the next product we need to do. And this is why. And I gave all the data points, and then, voila, I became a product manager. Right. And does anybody know what a product manager does?
So a product manager is basically the person that kind of oversees the overall construction, from what I know, right? So they may not be as involved with like the specific technical details, but they're going to be making sure that the software team is doing what they are needed to do and meeting their deadlines, and the hardware team is connecting with them and basically managing the overall process.
You're very close, Oroshi. The reality is the best way to think of a product manager is the CEO of their product. Okay. And so they're running the product. Now, in most companies, there's actually a program manager that worries about the details of the schedule and getting things out on time. The product manager worries about making sure that the product is defined correctly so that the users love it. Quite often in the software world, the product manager will work very closely with the user experience designer to make sure that they're actually designing the product to the needs of the customer. But the product manager kind of sits at that intersection of customer and technical and execution. It's really a critical role. And I think they're starting to have courses in product management now at university. That didn't exist when I was growing up, when I was in my university years. And so for me, it was just, I was so curious and I didn't wait for somebody to tell me what to do. I said, hey, here are my thoughts. And then they would give feedback, and then, I would keep iterating. And then eventually they said, we really need someone to be worrying about what's next. Do you want that role? And I said, oh my gosh, yes. If you can get me away from that breadboard, I will be so happy. So anyways, fast forward, that became my career trajectory. So for every step of the way, I became a product manager. I did so much work talking to customers and the technologies and putting it all together. And then what I found was the marketing folks weren't telling the story right. I'm like, well, no, we did this because this customer wanted, and here's the vision of the story. And so then they started putting me in front of customers. They started putting me in front of press. And so, my job was to tell the story of the product as well as to develop the product so that the product would be successful. So the target customer would find the product. Anyways, then I started running marketing and product, right? So I became product leader, and then I ended up running marketing and product, and then eventually was promoted to vice president of marketing. And I had all product management and all marketing communications and branding underneath me. Every step of the way, though, I would go take classes. I would pick mentors to help me out, right? So fast forward, I ended up just continuing this journey. And then the next step was really business management. Because remember, I wanted to be a CEO. I always wanted to be a CEO. And so I ended up taking all of the skills that I had developed as a product manager, a CEO of my product, and I ended up becoming a general manager of an entire business. And what was great about once I became a GM, I ended up having a finance team supporting me who taught me all about how to manage a business and what a profit and loss statement looked like and all the things that you'll need to know to do that. So you can kind of see where this is going. And I really wanted to, not just have a great product, but a great product that made money for the company. And so I joined a company called Plantronics, and I ended up running all of the consumer business at Plantronics, and that went really well. And so they gave me all of the business. So I ended up being basically the chief product officer of all of the products at Plantronics. That's when I ended up at Google. So they saw me and they said, hey, we're really trying to take the Android platform and the Chrome platform and move it over to, school and education. Will you come run that for us? So I ended up at Google running their business and so forth and so on. So about 2 years ago, I ended up, and so I just kept running business. Now, I had a couple steps along the way to be the CEO. And what I learned is that I actually didn't want to be the CEO because it's a lot of pressure. But what I really love doing is running businesses. And so that was the path I did. So 2 years ago, all of a sudden I took a step back and said, you know, I was blessed. I grew up in a privileged household in Silicon Valley with a CEO as a father who mentored me. And then you look at the results, and often in my teams, there weren't any women. It was all men. And the few women that came through really shined, especially in product, because just by the nature, women tend to be more empathetic, and that empathy drives better product decisions. So I started actively looking on how I could give back. And what I ended up doing is a couple things. I now chair the board at my alma mater, Santa Clara University School of Engineering. But I joined the board there, and we started a whole initiative around women in engineering and how we can get more women, not just to take engineering classes, but to actually see how we can make them successful after school. So that was the first thing I did. The second thing I did was I ended up kind of taking all this experience and knowledge that I had gained, and I became a mentor at a program that is called the Miller Center. It's also out of Santa Clara University, but they bring in entrepreneurs from all over the world who are trying to build products that are what we call socially responsible. So it's either like bringing clean water to Africa. It's helping successful birth rates in Africa. I mentored a company that was doing that. But whatever it is, it has a social impact. And that's how I met Scientific Adventures for Girls, because in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, it's now my mission to figure out how to help girls see that engineering is a very viable path for the future. Because to be honest with you, yeah. Anyways, go girls, we're better. Did I say that? Oops, sorry. Girls are really very focused and very empathetic. So anyways, so I met up with the CEO of Scientific Adventures for Girls, and their mission is to actually, I kind of break up the challenge in 3 phases. The first phase is, how do you get folks like yourself interested in engineering at an early age and realize it's a fun, viable career path? And then there's the, getting them into college phase. And then there's the once they're out of college phase. And I was like, oh my gosh, Scientific Adventures for Girls is perfect in that pre-stage. So they literally start at kindergarten and go all the way up into middle school. And their after school programming for women, for girls, in underprivileged neighborhoods. So they do a lot of schools in Oakland, Berkeley, where they're barely above the poverty level, frankly. And now what we're doing is we're exposing them to not just engineering basics, but basics of science and math, and we make it fun, right? You've probably all done that slime experiment at some point. But just making it fun and relevant. And now when we're starting to track the track record, our girls are now really, they're starting to get into college and they're taking technical paths. And these are girls that would never have done that. So I ended up mentoring her, and then she asked me to join her board, and then the rest was history. And so my mission now is, what I'm doing now is I very much, I invest in companies. I'm an investor. I'm a partner at a venture capital firm. Venture capital firms invest in startups. and then mentor the startups to make them successful. And so that's what I'm doing full time now, and I love it. Anyways, that was probably a little bit longer than it intended to be, but hopefully it was interesting and informative. What kind of questions can I answer?
Yeah, so I think we can start our Q&A session. So if people want to add questions to the chat, go for it. Or if you'd like to unmute and ask your question, raise your hand and we'll call on you. But to just kind of get the discussion started, so a lot of people have this idea that they need to go to prestigious colleges or they need to go to UCs. Well, actually, we have students from all over US here with us today. So maybe like Ivy schools and things like that, right? So what do you think people should consider when choosing colleges? Because sometimes these prestigious schools may not be the best fit for everyone. So just what are your thoughts of choosing and going through the college process?
So, so first of all, as an undergraduate, this may not be a popular thing to say, but yes, we all want to go to a great school. It's not the school that makes a difference in the undergraduate, unless you want to get a graduate degree. So if you're going, if you plan to get your doctorate, then going to a prestigious school it will help you with that milestone. But if your goal is to get a 4-year degree and then go into the workforce and then maybe get your master's later, the school you go to, if you go to, frankly, a top 100 school, anything in that top 100, you're going to do just fine. The reality is the school you go to helps you get your first job. That's it. From there, it's really up to you. And like I told you, like I had mentioned in the beginning, that the school you go to, you're learning what's the best knowledge at that point in time. It is guaranteed that like even 3 to 5 years later, all of that has changed. So the real important thing is your effort, your growth mindset, and your attitude towards learning through your life that will make a difference. I often watch some of the smartest people in the real world fail because they've forgotten to develop their social skills. And in the real world, you actually need to be able to communicate clearly and do good work. And I also see them fail because they're punching a clock and they don't put in their effort. Effort trumps, college every single day. And I know there are people that will debate that all day long, but in my experience, those elite colleges get you into graduate school and they get you your first job, and then it's up for you. So if you don't get into an elite college, it's okay. You just go in and learn everything that you can learn, and you will get in a reasonably good school and you'll do great. I mean, I went to Santa Clara University. If there's people from the East Coast, you probably didn't even heard of Santa Clara University, and I did just fine.
That actually ties into another question we got into the chat. So how do you recommend that people, specifically students here, continue to expand their skills and knowledge? And do you have any resources that you recommend that we as students use or try to get access to in order to kind of learn a little bit? Because I know a lot of these participants are middle school students, so college is not even on their minds just yet. So
yeah, well, so first of all, you're already doing it. Like what you're doing right now is brilliant. You are getting exposure in a way that wasn't even possible even 5 or 10 years ago. You are so lucky, because you've got all of these virtual classes, you've got, you know, all of these programs that are either free or extremely inexpensive to participate in. If you don't like the formal classes, then do the informal classes. You know, there are so many low cost or zero cost online forums. So pick your area of interest. The key is, if this is something you want to pursue, then you put some discipline around it, right? Don't leave it so open-ended. But don't forget to have fun. Don't be so serious about it that you forget to have fun. You know, give yourself a little goal and write it down. You know, 2 hours a week of coding, you know, or 2 hours a week of class, and then pick your class and just do it. That's on top of, you know, your other work. I hope that's helpful. You guys are really, really lucky. You know, when I was growing up, the internet didn't exist. Coding wasn't really a thing. Everything was physical. And there just wasn't there. You know, we didn't have these kind of programs. So yeah, you guys are really, really, really lucky.
All right, so I think Sahana had a question real quick.
Many people think that like engineering is like strictly math or like mechanical engineering or computer science, but like technology and like engineering has many applications like in humanity fields. So what are some ways that you've seen AI or like other technologies used in humanity fields?
AI is used everywhere. You know, I have a really kind of interesting perspective because I'm an investor, and I literally see at least 10 to 15 startups a week pitch. And I see probably the biggest changes happening around the field of medicine. So let me just give you an example that's really, really, really inspirational. So when people have cancer, there's a lot of different types of cancers, and there's probably exponentially different types of treatments for cancer. And right now, like the traditional path is that it's called trial and error. And you just hope the cancer is less aggressive, or you hit the lottery and you get the right, you know, the right treatment for your cancer before the cancer takes over. It's really almost barbaric, you know, the way we treat cancer today. I'm starting to see AI where they actually take tissue and they use AI to understand and predict how that tissue is going to respond to the various treatments. So they almost simulate treatment against that, like using AI. And so now, you know, instead of doing like these hundreds of treatments and hoping that you get one right, you can go right to the right treatment and get your best chance for an outcome. I mean, that's kind of crazy, insane, awesome, right? I'm seeing a lot of AI in drug development. They use AI a ton in DNA analysis. So the medical field is being completely transformed with AI. This one's interesting. I see AI used in policing. So there are systems and software that, based on history and data, circumstances, weather, like there's so many different inputs that they can predict when crime will be higher and where it will be located, so that they can take limited resources in the police department and focus them in the most likely times and the most likely places that the crime's going to be happening. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So many cool applications.
Actually, one thing to tie into AI in the medical field, actually one of the group projects that the participants are working on is predicting the risk of heart attacks in people based off of various factors such as cholesterol level, chest pain type, etc. So I just think it's really cool that all of these applications that we hear of in the news or through articles, we are actually able to do this ourselves with open source data sets and just basic implementation guides. So
yeah, no, that's amazing. And then, okay, so I'm going to share a personal passion project with you guys. And part of the reason why I became an investor is to find the company that is doing this. So, so with AI and the fact that we're collecting massive amounts of data through wearables, you know, this thing is tracking my heart rate 24/7. 24/7, they know my heart rate. There are now companies, and I still think it can actually be taken to the next level, but there are now companies that can actually predict disease based on all of these data points. So, so one of these sensors goes under your mattress. This one company has a sensor that goes under your mattress. They can track your heart rate. They can track your breathing and your sleeping. And with those three things, they could predict, to your point, congestive heart failure. If you were diabetic, they could predict if you were about to have like a seizure, a diabetic seizure, and they could predict all sorts of other diseases. They're just getting FAA approvals for all of these different diseases by just tracking those three things. And so the value here, and this is where kind of this, like I get so excited about the future, is that you can use all of these data and AI to get in front of diseases of all kinds, whether they be a heart disease, diabetes, like whatever it is, so that you can get treatment before it's too late. And it's just absolutely amazing. The second thing it'll do is it'll allow you to get treatment early enough so you can be treated from home and you know, not have to go to the hospital. So anyways, yeah, such an exciting space.
Yeah, there's so many applications of AI, especially today we'll be covering a lot about how it's used in the environment and stuff. So really looking forward to that. So next, I believe Aniri has a question.
Yeah. You said that in college you explored like a bunch of different things, like even in like cheer and like many different, like even non-related to career things. Would you recommend like exploring everything like as much as you want, or would you explore sticking to more career-based and like focusing on what you plan to do in the future?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm going to give you my answer, but you actually have to do you, right? Everybody is different. By the way, my dad was not happy with my choices. You know, that mentor that I had that made me go to get my degree in electrical engineering, when I became a college cheerleader, he almost fell off his chair. What are you doing? You're going to destroy your life. So, so sometimes I kind of ignored the logic and just went with what made me happy. And in hindsight, I didn't know this in foresight, it ended up teaching me a lot about work-life balance. And I felt like I was a better human coming out of it. So my answer is going to be balance it, right? But do something, you know. I'm just a big fan. If you're working hard, have a release, and you'll actually be better at work. If you're not working 24/7 at your, whether it be your schoolwork or even in, you know, when you've landed in your career, just find what brings you happy, choose happy. And then you'll be much more well-rounded, much more clear-headed, and then you'll learn how to like kind of juggle the balance. But for me, I was just like always like a natural problem solver. I see opportunities and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go solve that problem. And, you know, they weren't always career oriented. But by the way, the fact that I'd solved those problems from scratch and that I had a balanced career or in college actually got me my first job. That's exactly why I got the job, because they go, hey, this is a human, not a robot.
Yeah, I definitely think that being able to balance out your activities does benefit you because one, it makes you, it gets you to participate in things that you're actually passionate about. But at the same time, it kind of just gives you a break from all the other things that you're doing for your career. So like our engineering classes, balance it out with a couple of humanity classes. So then you don't get overwhelmed with one thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Can I just add one more thing to that? I just really, I believe that, if you follow your heart, and no matter what you do in the short term and the long term, then you never work a single day in your life. I have to tell you, there wasn't a single day that I got up and went to work that I felt sad for going to work. I always looked forward to work. And if you end up choosing something that you love, then you actually never work a day in your life. And when you're approaching work from that point of view, success happens, right? People, you're contagious. People like follow you. It's and you're happy. That's really the goal of life.
So I think we're almost done with our session, but one last question from Anahita.
Yeah, I was wondering how you recommend that like students my age or in high school find somebody like a mentor that can help them like you had.
Have you met people in your journey that impress you?
Mm-hmm.
What have you done about it?
Not as much as I probably should have. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, and you know what? You're normal, right? And so I always say I collect great people. When I find somebody I like, if they're older than me, if they're younger than me, if they're whatever, I follow up. I ping them. I say, I so enjoyed that talk. Would you be willing to have a cup of coffee with me? Or, like I said, through my career, some have picked me, and I've picked a lot of them. My mentor right now, by the way, is the founder of this VC firm. You know how I met her? I took a class at Stanford on investing in small businesses. She was my teacher. That's how I met her. I really liked her. So we just kept in touch. She invited me to get involved. She actually made me an investor in residence, and the rest was history. So, the key is don't wait for them to come to you. You find someone that impresses you, that you connect with, and pursue them. Not all of them are going to have the time, and so they don't all work out. But that's my recommendation. And when you're in high school, it could be just a parent or a friend of your parents, or it can be a teacher. A lot of people choose their teachers as mentors.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, I know we've been mentioning a lot of different ways to stay involved with our program after the event, but one thing, if you're looking for a mentor, I highly recommend you sign up for our peer-to-peer mentorship program, because through that, we will actually match you guys up with either graduate students or industry professionals in the fields that you're interested in. So definitely just keep out an eye for those kinds of programs, either from us or other organizations, and definitely do a lot of just cold emailing to different professors or people you've seen in different talks or even speaker panels like this. All right, so with that, I think that's all we have for today's speaker session. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today, Ms. Niemi. We were really excited to hear you talk. And
it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I wish you all the best. And, you're already step ahead. You're on your learning journey. So I'm really, really excited to see this program and see all your faces or icons anyway.
All right.